The stars had been at peace for 12,000 years. The galactic concordat stretched across 3 spiral arms of the galaxy, and 847 different species lived together in harmony. They traded goods. They shared knowledge. They built great stations that floated between worlds like jewels in the darkness of space. Ambassador Al of the collective stood at the window of her office on Station Prime. Her long silver tendrils swayed gently as she watched ships come and go. They were graceful people. Their skin was pale blue and their bodies were thin and elegant. They had 6 arms and moved like dancers even when they walked. For 10,000 years, her people had been scholars and diplomats. They had never known war. None of the concordat species truly knew war anymore. There had been conflicts long ago, in the ancient times before the founders created the Great Peace. But those days were so far in the past that they seemed like dreams. Violence was something that happened in stories, not in real life. Stories. Al thought about the stories she had heard as a child. Every species in the concordat had them. Tales told to younglings when the lights went low and the stars grew bright. Tales of monsters from a forbidden corner of space. Humans, they were called. The story said they came from a terrible world, a class 12 where the very air was poison to most species. They breathed oxygen, a gas so dangerous that it could make metal rust and flesh burn. They drank water, a liquid that could dissolve almost anything given enough time. Their planet had extreme temperatures, violent storms, and massive predators. Earthquakes shook their ground. Volcanoes spit fire into their skis. The radiation from their sun caused their very cells to break down over time. And yet the story said the humans had survived. More than survived. They had thrived. They had crawled out of the mud and looked up at the stars and decided that they would reach them. They had tamed predators. They had crossed oceans. They had split the atom and walked on their own moon. The story said humans could heal from wounds that would kill any other species. They said humans could run for days without stopping, chasing their prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. They said humans formed bonds with dangerous animals and called them pets. They said humans would cross entire galaxies to save a friend, and burn entire galaxies to avenge one. Al had always thought these were just stories, scary tales to make younglings behave. Be good, parents would say, or the humans will come. She smiled at the memory. Such silly things, those old stories. Her assistant, a small fuzzy creature named from the species, entered her office with a tablet in his paws. His round eyes were troubled. Ambassador said, "There is news from the outer rim. The hegemony has made another conquest." Al sighed. They were the one dark spot in the peaceful galaxy. They were a warrior species who had never fully accepted the concordat's ways. For the past few centuries, they had been expanding their territory by force. They conquered smaller species and took their worlds. The concordat condemned these actions in strong words but did nothing to stop them. The truth was simple and sad. The concordat had forgotten how to fight. They had no weapons. They had no warriors. They had only words, and words did not stop the. "Which species have they taken now?" Al asked. Looked at his tablet. It was a small mining colony on the edge of Sector Omega-7, only a few thousand inhabitants. The report says they were. He paused and made a confused sound. The report says they were an unknown species, not registered in any concordat database. Al frowned. That was strange. The concordat had mapped every inhabited world in the galaxy. Every species was known and documented. How could there be an unknown species? "What else does the report say?" she asked. "They have taken the colonists as slaves. They are being transported to work camps." Looked up from his tablet. "Ambassador, there is something else. The colonists sent a transmission before they were captured, a distress signal." "Where did they send it?" Hesitated. "Into Sector Omega-7 itself, deep into the blackout zone." A cold feeling crept through Al's body. Sector Omega-7 was forbidden space. Every star map in the concordat showed it as a dead zone, filled with nothing but radiation storms and empty rocks. Ships that entered never returned. The founders themselves had declared it off-limits 12,000 years ago, and no one had questioned that order since. "That sector is empty," Al said. "There is nothing there to receive a signal." "Yes," Ambassador agreed. "That is what I thought too, but the colonists sent their message there. They sent it to a specific planet, a planet called—" He checked his tablet again. "Earth." The word hit Al like a physical blow. "Earth, the of humans, the from the old stories." "That is impossible," she said. "Humans are not real, they are myths, stories for children." But even as she spoke the words, doubt crept into her mind. Why was Sector Omega-7 forbidden? Why had the founders sealed it away? The official records said it was dangerous, but dangerous how? There were many dangerous places in the galaxy, and none of them were hidden behind sensor blackouts. What if the stories were true? No, she pushed the thought away. It was foolish. Humans were legends, nothing more. The colonists had probably sent their signal to an old relay station or an abandoned outpost. There was certainly a logical explanation. She told herself this again and again over the following days. She told herself this when the first patrol ship vanished near Sector Omega-7. She told herself this when the second patrol vanished, and the third, and the fourth. They were not worried at first. Ships were lost all the time in the outer rim. Space was dangerous. There were asteroid fields and radiation storms and equipment failures. But when the fifth patrol disappeared without even sending a distress signal, High Commander of the Hegemony began to pay attention. It was a massive creature. There were reptilian beings, covered in thick scales that ranged from dark green to black. They had 4 arms, each ending in claws that could tear through metal. Their faces were flat and brutal, with small red eyes that showed no mercy. They had evolved as pack hunters on a harsh world, and they had never lost their love for the kill. Stood in the command center of his flagship and studied the reports. 5 patrols gone, 30 ships in total. Over 2,000 warriors simply vanished. "What is in that sector?" he demanded. His officers looked at each other nervously. "Nothing, High Commander. According to all records, Sector Omega-7 is empty, dead worlds and radiation." "Then why are my ships disappearing?" No one had an answer. Made a decision. He would send a larger force, 100 ships armed with the best weapons the hegemony possessed. They would enter Sector Omega-7 and find whatever was destroying his patrols, and they would crush it. The fleet departed 3 cycles later, watched them go from the bridge of his flagship. He expected them to return within 10 cycles, bringing prisoners and plunder. They never returned at all. 100 ships, 5,000 warriors, gone without a trace, not a single distress call, not a single piece of debris. They had simply entered the forbidden sector and ceased to exist. Now was afraid. He was not the only one. News of the vanishing fleet spread through the Concordat like fire through dry grass. The peaceful species who had ignored this conquests for centuries suddenly found themselves paying very close attention. Ambassador Al called an emergency session of the Concordat Council. Representatives from all 847 species gathered in the Great Hall of Station Prime. The noise was tremendous, as thousands of different voices spoke in hundreds of different languages. Al raised her tendrils for silence. Slowly, the hall grew quiet. "We have all heard the reports," she said. "The hegemony has lost over 100 ships in Sector Omega-7. We must understand what is happening." A representative stepped forward. His name was X, and he was one of the few who served in the Concordat. "The hegemony demands answers," he growled. "Something in that sector is destroying our ships. The Concordat claims to know all things. Tell us what hides in that darkness." Al hesitated. She had done research since her conversation with. She had looked into old records and ancient files. What she had found disturbed her deeply. "There is something I must share with the Council," she said. "But first, I must ask a question. Does anyone here know why Sector Omega-7 is forbidden?" Silence. The representatives looked at each other. No one spoke. "I searched the archives," Al continued. "The official reason is that the sector is dangerous, radiation storms, unstable stars, but this is a lie." Murmurs spread through the hall. The true records were sealed by the founders themselves. They were hidden so deeply that it took me days to find them. What I found, she paused, what I found changes everything we thought we knew. She activated the display at the center of the hall. Images appeared. Ships, but not like any ships the Council had seen before. They were angular and brutal, made of dark metal. They looked like weapons given form. 8,000 years ago, Al said, the founders made first contact with a species from Sector Omega-7. The contact did not go well. More images, battle scenes, Concordat vessels burning in the void, explosions like small stars. The species was called humanity. They came from a planet called Earth, a Class 12. Gasps filled the hall. The representatives knew what a Class 12 meant. It meant a world so dangerous that life should not exist there at all. The founders attempted to establish peaceful relations. The humans, Al paused again, the humans were not interested in peace. They were territorial, aggressive, suspicious. A brief war followed. "A war," someone called out. "The Concordat does not wage war." "We do not wage war now," Al corrected. "But 8,000 years ago we had weapons. We had warriors. We thought we were strong." She showed more images. Concordat fleets moving into formation. Thousands of ships, more than most of the representatives had ever seen in one place. The founders sent their greatest fleet against humanity, 12,000 ships, the largest force ever assembled. The next image showed debris, twisted metal floating in the void, the remains of ships torn apart like paper. The battle lasted 6 hours. The Concordat fleet was destroyed, all 12,000 ships. Humanity lost 47. The hall erupted in chaos. Representatives shouted and screamed. Some fled for the exits. Others stood frozen in shock. Al waited for the noise to die down. When it finally did, she spoke again. The founders realized they could not defeat humanity. They could not conquer them. They could not reason with them, so they made a different choice. They erected a censor blackout around humanity's region of space. They removed all records of the war from public archives. They allowed humanity to become a legend, a myth, a scary story for children. She looked around the hall. The founders hoped that if the galaxy forgot about humanity, humanity would forget about the galaxy. They hoped that given enough time, the dangerous species from them would fade away, die out, destroy themselves. "And did they?" X demanded. "Are the humans extinct?" Al shook her head slowly. "I do not know. For 8,000 years, nothing has come out of Sector Omega-7, until now." "The mining colony," someone said. "The unknown species they captured." "Yes," Al confirmed. "I believe the colonists were human. I believe they have been living in that sector all this time. And I believe that when they took them as slaves, they sent a message to their." "Asking for help," X said. "Asking for help," Al agreed. The hall was silent now. Every representative understood what this meant. If the old records were true, if humanity was as dangerous as the founders believed, then they had just made the worst mistake in galactic history. They had attacked the monsters from the stories. And the monsters had answered. Somewhere in the darkness of Sector Omega-7, something was waking up. Something old. Something patient. Something that had waited 8,000 years for the galaxy to forget its fear. Ambassador Al looked out the window of the great hall at the peaceful stars beyond. She thought of the old stories she had heard as a child. Stories of humans who breathed poison and drank acid. Humans who tamed predators and crossed oceans. Humans who would burn galaxies to save their own. She had always thought those stories were meant to frighten children. Now she understood the truth. The stories were meant to frighten everyone. And she had a terrible feeling that the galaxy was about to remember why. High Commander stood in his war room and stared at the map of Sector Omega-7. The Forbidden Zone glowed red on the display, a vast area of space that his ships could not enter and return from. 130 ships lost now, 7,000 warriors gone, and still no answer to the simple question, what was killing them? His officers stood around him in silence. They were afraid to speak, was known for his terrible temper, and the news had only grown worse with each passing day. "Tell me again," said slowly, "about these humans." General X stepped forward. He was old for his scales faded to a dull gray. He had served the hegemony for over 200 years. "The Concordat files describe them as coming from a Class 12, X said. There has extreme conditions, poison atmosphere, temperature changes that would kill most species, massive predators, natural disasters of every kind, yet they survived and evolved to become the dominant species." "Dominant how?" asked. "They are pursuit predators, High Commander. Their ancestors hunted by chasing prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. They can run for days without rest. Their bodies heal from wounds that would be fatal to other species. They can survive the loss of limbs, organs, even parts of their brains." Made a dismissive sound. "We have heard such things before. Many species claim to be strong, few truly are." "There is more," X said quietly. "The ancient records describe their psychology. They form bonds of loyalty that override all logic. They will sacrifice themselves for others without hesitation. They will pursue enemies across any distance for any length of time simply because they feel wronged. They call it spite." Spite. A desire to harm another even when it brings no benefit to oneself, even when it causes self-harm. Humans will destroy themselves to destroy their enemies. The founders considered this their most dangerous trait. Thought about this. They understood revenge. They understood strength and weakness, predator and prey. But this concept of spite was strange to him. Why would any creature choose to suffer just to make another suffer? 8,000 years have passed, said. Surely they have changed. Perhaps they have grown weaker. Perhaps they have destroyed themselves. Perhaps, X agreed, but the missing ships suggest otherwise. Growled low in his throat. He had built his reputation on strength. He had conquered 40 species and brought them under rule. He had never retreated from any enemy, but this enemy was different. This enemy was invisible, unknown. It struck without warning and left no survivors to tell the tale. For the first time in his long life, did not know what to do. Far away, on Station Prime, Ambassador Al was having her own crisis. The revelation about humanity had thrown the Concordat into chaos. Some species demanded immediate action. Others wanted to wait and observe. A few suggested sending peace envoys into Sector Omega-7. Those suggestions died quickly when it was pointed out that the last species to enter that sector had lost over 100 ships. Al spent her days in meetings and her nights in the archives. She read everything the founders had written about humanity. Most of it terrified her, but some of it confused her. The founders had written about human art, music, poetry. They had written about human capacity for love and sacrifice. They had written about humans risking their lives to save complete strangers. They had written about a species that kept other creatures as companions, forming bonds of affection that lasted lifetimes. How could the same species that showed such kindness also wage such terrible war? The answer, Al realized, was simple. Humans were not one thing. They were many things. They could love deeply and hate deeply. They could create beauty and cause destruction. They were capable of mercy and cruelty in equal measure. This made them unpredictable, and unpredictable was dangerous. Entered her office with more news. His fur was standing on end, a sign of extreme stress. "Ambassador," he said. "Something has emerged from Sector Omega-7. Al felt her heart stop. What kind of something? A signal, a broadcast on all frequencies. It is, paused, his small body trembling. It is a message in the common tongue. Play it. Touched his tablet. A voice filled the room. It was like no voice Al had ever heard. It was deep and strong, neither male nor female by standards. It spoke the common tongue perfectly, but with an accent that was entirely alien. "This message is for the hegemony," the voice said. "You have taken our people, you have made them slaves. This was a mistake. You have 40 standard cycles to return them unharmed. If you do not, we will come for them ourselves. There will be no second warning. There will be no negotiation. There will be no mercy. Signed, Admiral Way, Terran Human Navy." The message ended. Silence filled the office. 40 cycles, whispered. That is barely enough time to travel from the outer rim to space. They are giving them a chance to surrender, Al said. They could simply attack without warning, but they are giving them a chance. Will they take it? Al thought about High Commander. She thought about pride and stubbornness. She thought about a species that had never surrendered in its entire history. "No," she said, "they will not." She was right. When the human message reached, he watched it 3 times. Then he began to laugh. 40 cycles, he said to his officers. They give us 40 cycles, as if we are children who need time to think, as if we would ever bow to such threats. "High Commander," X said carefully, "perhaps we should consider." "Consider what? Surrender. Give back our rightful property because some hidden enemy makes demands," slammed his fist on the table. "The do not surrender, the do not negotiate, the conquer." But the missing ships were lost to trickery and ambush. In open battle we are unmatched. We have 12,000 warships. We have the greatest army in the galaxy. What do these humans have? Shadows and threats. Made his decision. He would not wait for the humans to come to him. He would gather his entire fleet and go to them. He would enter Sector Omega-7 with such overwhelming force that nothing could stand against him. And when he found the humans, he would crush them completely. "Send word to all hegemony worlds," commanded. "Every ship is to gather at the border of Sector Omega-7. We march to war." His officers saluted and hurried to obey. Only X remained behind. "High Commander," he said quietly, "the ancient records say the Founders sent 12,000 ships against the humans. They lost all of them." "The Founders were weak," replied. "The Concordat species have always been weak. They are scholars and merchants, not warriors, but we were born for battle. We will succeed where they failed." X wanted to argue more, but he knew it was useless, had made up his mind. Nothing would change it now. As the fleet began to gather, strange things started to happen across the galaxy. Signals were detected coming from Sector Omega-7. Not just one signal, but hundreds, thousands. They were short bursts of data, too encrypted for any Concordat system to decode. Then came the ships began reporting contacts at the edge of space, brief glimpses on sensors, shadows that appeared and vanished before they could be properly tracked. The ships were not like anything in the Concordat database. They were dark and angular, built for function rather than form. They were watching, waiting. Ambassador Al requested an emergency audience with High Commander. To her surprise, he agreed. Perhaps even he wanted information. They met on a neutral station in the border region, towered over the ambassador, his massive form radiating menace. But Al stood her ground. "High Commander," she said, "I urge you to reconsider. Return the human colonists. Avoid this conflict." Made a sound of contempt. "You ask me to show weakness, to bow to threats from an enemy I have never even seen. I ask you to show wisdom. The Founders were not fools. They feared humanity for good reason. 8,000 years ago, they tried to fight and they lost everything." 8,000 years is a long time, replied. Species change, grow soft. Perhaps these humans have forgotten how to wage war. Or perhaps they have spent 8,000 years preparing for the day they would need to wage it again. Paused. This thought had not occurred to him. What would a species like humanity do with 8,000 years of isolation? Would they fade away and die, or would they grow stronger? He pushed the thought aside. It did not matter. They were committed now. To back down would be to admit fear and the never-admitted fear. Your concern is noted, Ambassador, he said, but the decision is made. In 30 cycles, my fleet will enter Sector Omega-7 and end this threat forever. Al knew she had failed. She returned to Station Prime with a heavy heart. She began preparations for the worst. The Concordat Council met again, this time in closed session. The topic was survival. If they lost their war against humanity, what would happen next? Would the humans stop with or would they turn their attention to the rest of the galaxy? No one had answers. No one knew what humanity wanted. The ancient records showed a species capable of great violence but also great kindness. Would they be conquerors or liberators, destroyers or protectors? Perhaps they would simply disappear back into their forbidden sector, satisfied with punishing or perhaps they would see the entire Concordat as a threat and act accordingly. We must prepare for the worst, Al told the Council. We must begin building defenses, weapons, ships. We have forgotten how, someone said. Then we must remember. We have 30 cycles before the attack. If they fail, we may have only days before we face the same enemy. The Council voted to begin military preparations. For the first time in 8,000 years, the peaceful species of the Concordat started building weapons. It was slow and clumsy work. They had lost so much knowledge over but they tried. As the cycles passed, more reports came from the border. The human ships were becoming bolder. They no longer hid at the edge of sensors. They moved openly, patrolling the boundary of Sector Omega-7 like predators circling their territory. Their ships were magnificent and terrible, dark metal hulls that absorbed light rather than reflected it, engines that burned with blue fire, weapons systems that Concordat scientists could not even identify. Everything about them spoke of power held in check, of strength waiting to be unleashed. The fleet continued to grow. 12,000 ships, just as the founders had sent so long ago. But these were warships, designed for combat, was confident they would succeed where the founders had failed. On the final day before the attack, General X stood at a viewport and watched the fleet spread out against the stars. It was an impressive sight, the largest military force the hegemony had ever assembled. He thought about the ancient records. He thought about the founders' fleet, just as large, just as confident. He thought about how quickly it had been destroyed. "May the old gods have mercy on us," he whispered, "for I do not think these humans will." Across the void on the bridge of the THS Remembrance, Admiral Wei stood at her own viewport. She watched the fleet gather on her sensors. 12,000 ships. The enemy had come in force. Good. Behind her, the bridge crew worked in calm silence. They had been preparing for this moment for years, for decades, for centuries. Every system had been tested. Every weapon had been checked. Every sailor knew their duty. "Admiral," her communications officer said, "the deadline has passed. They have not returned our people." Wei nodded slowly. She had expected this. They were proud, just like the reports said. They would not surrender without a fight. They would not understand what they faced until it was too late. "Send word to the fleet," she said. "All ships to battle stations. We move at dawn." "Dawn, Admiral. There is no dawn in space." Wei smiled slightly. It was an old tradition, older than itself. Humans had always gone to war at dawn. "Earth dawn," she said. "Greenwich Mean Time. When the sun rises over London, we attack." The communications officer nodded and sent the order. Across the human fleet, thousands of sailors began their final preparations. They checked their weapons. They wrote letters to loved ones. They said prayers to whatever gods they believed in. And on the bridge of the remembrance, Admiral Wei looked at the stars that had been to her people for 8,000 years. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, the galaxy would remember why they had feared humanity. Tomorrow, the stories would become real. She touched the small pendant around her neck. It was a simple thing, a piece of blue stone from Earth. Her grandmother had given it to her years ago, along with a piece of advice. "The galaxy forgot us," her grandmother had said. "They sealed us away and hoped we would die, but we did not die. We grew, we learned, we waited. And one day, granddaughter, we will show them that humans never stay forgotten for long." Admiral Wei closed her eyes and made a promise. The colonists would be saved. They would pay for their crimes. And the galaxy would learn that the stories about humans were not just stories. They were warnings. The fleet moved into Sector Omega-7 like a great wave of metal and fire. 12,000 warships spread across the void, their engines burning bright against the darkness. At the center of the formation flew the flagship, the Sfang, where High Commander watched the advance from his throne. He felt confident, powerful. His fleet was the mightiest force the hegemony had ever assembled. Whatever lurked in this forbidden sector would soon learn the price of challenging the "Sensors report no contacts," his tactical officer announced. "The sector appears empty." "Keep scanning," ordered. "They are hiding somewhere." The fleet pushed deeper into the forbidden zone. Hours passed. The stars here were strange, older and colder than the ones near space. There were no inhabited worlds, no stations, no signs of civilization at all. Had humanity truly hidden here for 8,000 years? It seemed impossible. There was nothing to sustain a species in this desolation. Then the sensors began to scream. "Contact!" the tactical officer shouted. Multiple contacts emerging from hyperspace directly ahead. Leaned forward. "How many?" The officer's voice trembled. "Still counting, High Commander. 100, 200, 300. The number kept climbing. On the main display, watched as ship after ship appeared out of nothing. They dropped out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation, their arrival precisely timed. The coordination was incredible. No fleet could have managed such precision. "Final count," the tactical officer said. 312 enemy vessels. Blinked 300. Against his 12,000, he began to laugh. "This is their great force. This is what the galaxy fears." He stood from his throne. "They are outnumbered 40 to 1. Signal all ships, advance and destroy them." The fleet surged forward. 12,000 warships accelerated toward the small human formation. Weapons charged. Target locks confirmed. Victory seemed certain. Then the human fleet began to move. Had never seen ships move like that. They did not fly in straight lines like sensible vessels. They twisted and spun and curved through space like living things. Their acceleration was impossible. They pulled turns that should have killed everyone aboard. They moved faster than his targeting systems could track. And at the front of their formation was the largest ship had ever seen. It was a monster of black metal, longer than a small moon. Its hull was covered in weapons batteries, sensor arrays, and strange devices that the computer could not identify. It moved with the grace of a predator, flowing through space as if the laws of physics were merely suggestions. The human dreadnought was called the THS Remembrance, and as it approached the fleet, it began to glow. "High Commander," the tactical officer said, his voice barely a whisper, "they are charging weapons." "Then fire first," roared. All ships opened fire. The fleet unleashed everything it had. Thousands of plasma bolts streaked across space. Missiles launched by the hundreds. Energy beams cut through the void. It was the most concentrated barrage in hegemony history. It hit nothing. The human ships were simply not there anymore. They had moved, scattered like leaves in a wind, dodging between the incoming fire with impossible grace. Plasma bolts that should have struck their hulls passed through empty space. Missiles that should have connected exploded against nothing. The had fired at where the humans were. The humans were already somewhere else. Then the humans returned fire. The Remembrance spoke first. Its main cannon was something they had never encountered before. There was no visible beam, no flash of light, just a pulse of something that could not be seen, only felt. The pulse hit a cruiser in the center of the fleet. The cruiser did not explode. It did not break apart. It simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, a ship of 5,000 warriors. The next moment it was atoms scattered across the void. 200 ships died in the first 10 seconds. Watched in horror as his fleet began to disappear. The human weapons were like nothing he had ever seen. Some fired beams that cut through armor like it was paper. Others launched projectiles that moved so fast they were invisible. Still others released clouds of small machines that swarmed over hulls and tore them apart from the inside. "Fall back," screamed. "All ships fall back." But falling back was not possible. The human fleet had spread out around them. 300 ships now surrounded 12,000, and somehow the smaller force was winning. The human pilots were insane. They flew their fighters through the middle of the formation, weaving between warships with centimeters to spare. They pulled maneuvers that would have killed any crew from the force alone. They took hits that should have destroyed them and kept fighting. General X stumbled onto the bridge of the Sfang. His scales were pale with shock. "High Commander," he gasped, "the humans, they are not dying. I watched a human fighter get hit by a plasma bolt. The pilot should have been cooked alive, but she flew out of the flames and destroyed 3 of our ships before we could react." "That is impossible," said. "I saw it with my own eyes. Their bodies can survive things that would kill us instantly. The heat, the radiation, the acceleration forces, they simply endure." On the display, another group of ships vanished under human fire. The fleet was being torn apart. Ships that had served the hegemony for generations were dying by the dozens. And the humans had not lost a single vessel. Finally understood what the founders had faced 8,000 years ago. He understood why they had chosen to hide from humanity rather than fight them. He understood why the galaxy had tried so hard to forget. Humans were not just dangerous. Humans were extinction. On the bridge of the THS Remembrance, Admiral Wei watched the battle unfold with calm eyes. Her crew worked around her in controlled silence. There was no cheering, no celebration. This was not a game to them. It was a grim duty. "Enemy fleet is breaking formation," her tactical officer reported. "They are trying to retreat." "Do not let them," Wei said. "Pursue and destroy. Leave no ship capable of fighting." "Admiral," her executive officer said quietly, "they are beaten. They know it. Should we not offer them mercy?" Wei considered this. She thought about the human colonists who had been taken as slaves. She thought about the reports of how they treated their prisoners. She thought about the message she had sent, giving the 40 cycles to return her people. They had refused. They had chosen war. "We offered them mercy," she said. "They refused it. Now they face the consequences." The human fleet pressed its attack. Ships died by the hundreds. The proud warships of the hegemony were reduced to scattered debris. Warriors who had never known defeat learned the true meaning of terror. High Commander watched his fleet die and knew that he had failed. Not just failed in this battle, but failed completely. He had doomed his people through his own pride. "Signal the humans," he said at last. The words felt like poison in his mouth. Tell them we surrender." The tactical officer stared at him. "High Commander." "Do it," roared. "Signal our surrender before we all die." The message went out on all frequencies. The fleet, what remained of it, stopped firing. Ships that had been trying to flee came to a halt. The great hegemony, conquerors of 40 species, had surrendered. The human fleet stopped firing. For a long moment, nothing moved. The void was filled with debris and the floating bodies of dead warriors. Of the 12,000 ships that had entered Sector Omega-7, fewer than 2,000 remained, and most of those were damaged beyond repair. A response came from the human flagship. "This is Admiral Wei of the Terran Human Navy. Your surrender is accepted. You will power down all weapons and prepare to be boarded. Any resistance will result in immediate destruction. This is your only warning." Obeyed, he had no choice. His great fleet had been reduced to wreckage in less than 3 hours. 3 hours against an enemy that was outnumbered 40-1. Human boarding parties arrived within the hour. Expected monsters, savage beasts with fangs and claws. What he found was something different. The humans were small, smaller than by a full meter. They had soft skin with no scales. Their eyes were forward-facing like all predators, but there was something strange in those eyes, something cold and measuring. They moved through the ship with perfect discipline. Their weapons never wavered. Their formations never broke. They cleared each room with mechanical efficiency, taking prisoners without unnecessary violence. The human commander who boarded the Sfang was a tall female with dark skin and short gray hair. She introduced herself as Major Sarah. "High Commander," she said, her voice flat and professional. "You are under arrest for crimes against humanity. You will be transported to a holding facility until a proper trial can be arranged." "Crimes?" growled. "We took slaves. Every species takes slaves. It is the way of the strong." Major's eyes narrowed. "Humans do not take slaves, and we do not allow others to take our people as slaves. This is non-negotiable." "What will happen to me?" "That depends on the trial. If you are found guilty of ordering the enslavement of human citizens, you will be punished according to human law." "And if I am found innocent?" Major smiled slightly. It was not a friendly smile. "You will not be found innocent." Was led away in chains. The great conqueror, the terror of 40 species, was now a prisoner of the creatures his people had thought were myths. News of the battle spread across the galaxy within hours. The Concordat Council gathered in emergency session as reports came in. 12,000 ships destroyed. The hegemony's military power broken in a single engagement, and the humans had lost only 17 vessels. Ambassador Al listened to the reports with growing fear. They had been brutal conquerors, but they were known enemies. Humanity was unknown. What would they do now? Would they stop with or would they continue until the entire galaxy was under their control? "We must prepare for the worst," she told the council. "If humanity decides to attack us, we cannot stop them. We saw what they did to the fleet. Our defenses would last hours at most." "Perhaps we should flee," someone suggested. "Leave the galaxy entirely. Find somewhere humanity cannot follow." "There is nowhere they cannot follow," Al replied. "You saw their ships. Their technology is beyond anything we possess. If they want to find us, they will find us." "Then we must make peace with them, send envoys, offer whatever they want." "And what do they want? We do not even know what motivates them. Are they conquerors, liberators, destroyers? We know nothing about humanity except that they are very, very good at killing." The debate continued for hours. No one could agree on what to do. The peaceful species of the Concordat were paralyzed by fear and confusion. Then a message arrived from the human fleet. It was addressed to Ambassador Al personally. It came from Admiral Wei herself. "Ambassador," the message read, "I understand that the Concordat is afraid. I understand that you have heard stories about humanity for thousands of years, and those stories have taught you to fear us. I'm not going to pretend that those stories are lies. Humans are dangerous. We are capable of terrible violence, but we are also capable of other things. I would like to show you. I invite you to come to my flagship alone so that we may talk. I give you my personal guarantee of safety. Whatever happens, you will be allowed to leave unharmed. This is not a trick. This is not a trap. This is an invitation to understand." Al read the message 3 times. The council told her not to go. It was too dangerous. It could be a trap. The humans could not be trusted. But Al knew that someone had to take the first step. Someone had to find out what humanity really wanted. And if that someone died in the attempt, at least they would die trying to save the galaxy. She sent her response. "Admiral Wei, I accept your invitation. I will come alone. I hope for all our sakes that you are telling the truth." She boarded a small shuttle and set course for the human fleet. As she flew toward the massive dreadnought, she thought about the old stories again. Monsters from beings who breathed poison and drank acid, creatures who would burn galaxies for revenge. She was about to meet those creatures face to face. She hoped she would survive the experience. Ambassador Al's shuttle approached the human dreadnought slowly. The THS Remembrance grew larger and larger in her viewport until it filled the entire view. The ship was enormous. Its dark hull stretched for kilometers in every direction. Weapon ports dotted its surface like scars. Sensor arrays swept back and forth, watching everything. This was a ship built for war. Nothing about it was decorative or beautiful. Every line, every angle, every component served a purpose, and that purpose was destruction. Her shuttle received docking instructions and followed them precisely. She landed in a hangar bay that could have held a small fleet. Human soldiers stood in neat rows along the walls, their weapons held at rest but ready. Their faces showed no emotion. The hangar door opened, and Al stepped out into humanity's domain. The air hit her first. It was warm and thick, filled with oxygen at levels that would be dangerous for long-term exposure. She adjusted her breathing mask and looked around. The humans watched her with curious eyes. They were smaller than she had expected, shorter even than the. Their bodies were soft and fragile-looking, with no natural armor, no claws, no visible weapons. But she remembered what those fragile bodies had done to the fleet. Appearances were deceiving. A human female approached her. She was older, with lines on her face and silver streaks in her dark hair. She wore a uniform decorated with symbols that Al did not recognize. Her posture was straight and confident. Her eyes were sharp and intelligent. "Ambassador Al," the woman said, "I am Admiral Wei. Thank you for accepting my invitation." Al inclined her head. "Thank you for extending it, Admiral. I admit, I was not certain what to expect." "I imagine you expected monsters," Wei said. There was no accusation in her voice, only understanding. "The galaxy has been telling stories about us for a very long time. I doubt those stories were flattering." "They were concerning." "Concerning," Wei smiled slightly. "That is a diplomatic way of putting it. Come, let us walk and talk. There is much to discuss." They walked through the corridors of the Remembrance. Al noticed everything. The walls were clean and well-maintained. The crew members they passed moved with purpose but did not seem afraid. Several of them nodded respectfully to the Admiral. "Your ship is impressive," Al said. "I have never seen technology like this." 8,000 years of isolation gave us time to develop, Wei replied. "When the founders sealed us away, they thought they were protecting the galaxy from us. In some ways they were right, but they also gave us something precious. Time. Time to grow, time to learn, time to become more than we were. The founders believed you would destroy yourselves." Wei laughed softly. It was a strange sound, not quite like anything Al had heard before. "They nearly got their wish. Many times. Humans have a talent for self-destruction. We fought terrible wars among ourselves. We damaged our own planet. We created weapons capable of ending all life on Earth. But you survived." "We survived. Barely. And each time we came close to extinction, we learned something. We learned that strength without wisdom is meaningless. That power without purpose is dangerous. That a species capable of destroying itself must also be capable of saving itself." They entered a large observation room with windows looking out at the stars. The debris of the battle still floated in the distance. Broken ships caught the light of distant suns. "You destroyed an entire fleet," Al said. 12,000 ships in 3 hours. "I take no pleasure in it," Wei replied. Her voice was heavy. "Those were living beings. They had families, dreams, futures. I ended all of that because they would not return our people. I will carry that weight for the rest of my life." Al studied the Admiral closely. She had expected arrogance, pride, the satisfaction of a predator after a successful hunt. Instead, she saw sadness, weariness, the burden of someone who had done something terrible because there was no other choice. "You could have negotiated," Al said. "The Concordat could have mediated." "Could we? They took our people as slaves. They refused to return them. They brought 12,000 warships to attack us. What negotiation was possible?" Al had no answer. She knew they would never have surrendered their slaves willingly. The Admiral was right. There had been no other option. "What happens now?" Al asked. "Your people have been isolated for 8,000 years. Now you have defeated the strongest military power in the galaxy. What do you want?" Wei turned from the window to face her directly. "That is the question, is it not? What do the terrible humans want? Does the monster from the wish to conquer the galaxy, to enslave those who once enslaved us? Do you?" "No." The answer was simple and direct. Al waited for more. Wei walked to a table where a small device sat. She touched it and a hologram appeared. Images began to play. Al watched, confused at first, then fascinated. She saw humans creating art, paintings and sculptures of incredible beauty, music that stirred emotions she could not name, stories told in images that moved and spoke. She saw humans helping each other, doctors treating the sick, workers building homes, teachers educating children, strangers giving food to those who had none. She saw humans protecting other species, not conquering them, protecting them. Humans in protective clothing caring for creatures that looked nothing like themselves. Humans building shelters for animals whose homes had been destroyed. "What is this?" Al asked. "This is humanity," Wei said. "Not the warriors, not the destroyers. This is who we are when we are not fighting. For 8,000 years we have built a civilization. We have created wonders. We have learned to care for life in all its forms." The images continued. Humans rescuing strangers from disasters. Humans sacrificing themselves to save others. Humans showing kindness to creatures that could never repay them. "I do not understand," Al said. "You are capable of such destruction. How can you also be capable of this?" "Because we are both. That is what the founders never understood. Humans are not simply one thing. We are kind and cruel, peaceful and violent, creative and destructive. We can build civilizations and we can burn them down. The question is not what we are capable of. The question is what we choose." She turned off the hologram. "For 8,000 years we have been making choices. We have chosen to build rather than destroy, to heal rather than harm, to protect rather than conquer. We are not perfect. We never will be, but we are trying." Al felt her understanding of humanity shifting. The monsters from the stories were real, but they were also something more. Something complex and contradictory. Something that could not be easily understood. "Why did you invite me here?" she asked. "Why show me this?" "Because the galaxy needs to know the truth. The stories about humanity are not lies. We are dangerous. We will always be dangerous, but we are not only dangerous, and we do not wish to be enemies of the Concordat." "What do you wish?" Wei met her eyes. "We wish to join you not as conquerors, as members, partners, equals." The words hung in the air. Al struggled to process them. The most feared species in galactic history wanted to join the peaceful Concordat. "That is unexpected," she managed. "I imagine it is. The founders sealed us away because they feared what we might become. They were not wrong to fear, but they were wrong about what we would become. She paused. We have spent 8,000 years becoming something better. Now we want to prove it. A door opened behind them. A human soldier entered, followed by something that made Al take a step back in alarm. It was a creature, a predator clearly, 4 legs, fur covering its body, sharp teeth in a long snout, eyes that watched Al with alert intelligence. "Do not be afraid," Wei said. "This is Max. He is what we call a German shepherd, a dog." The predator walked past the soldier and sat down beside Wei. Its tongue hung out of its mouth. Its tail swept back and forth across the floor. "This creature is dangerous," Al said carefully. "Very dangerous. Dogs are descended from wolves, one of the most effective pack hunters on Earth. Their ancestors could bring down prey many times their size. And you keep them as companions." "We do. For thousands of years, humans and dogs have lived together. We hunt together. We protect each other. We love each other." Wei reached down and scratched the dog behind its ears. The predator made a sound of pleasure and leaned into her touch. Al watched this display with amazement. A human bonding with an apex predator as if it were a child. The stories had mentioned this, but seeing it was something else entirely. "We do this with many species," Wei continued. "Cats, horses, birds, creatures that should be our prey or our predators become our family. It is not logical, it is not practical. It is simply who we are." "Why?" "Because we are lonely." Wei's voice was soft. "Humans are social creatures. We need connection. We need love. And we find it wherever we can, even in the strangest places." She stood and faced Al directly. "This is what I am offering, Ambassador. Not conquest, not war, connection, partnership, the chance to be less alone in this vast universe." Al thought about everything she had seen, the terrible power of the human fleet, the sadness in the Admiral's eyes, the art and the kindness, the predator sitting peacefully at a human's feet. Humanity was all of these things. They were warriors and artists, destroyers and creators, monsters and guardians. They had looked into the darkness of their own nature and chosen to be something better. But choosing was not enough. They had to prove it. They had to show the galaxy that they could be trusted. "The Concordat will be afraid," Al said finally. "They have heard the stories for too long. They will not trust you easily." "I know," Wei replied. "I am not asking for trust, not yet. I am asking for a chance to earn it." "And if you cannot earn it, if the Concordat refuses?" Wei was silent for a moment. "Then we will return to our isolation. We will seal ourselves away again and let the galaxy forget us once more. We will not force ourselves upon those who do not want us." "You would accept rejection?" "We would. It would hurt. After 8,000 years, we are tired of being alone, but we will not become conquerors simply because we are lonely. That is not who we chose to be." Al made her decision. "I cannot speak for the entire Concordat," she said, "but I can speak for myself. I believe you, Admiral. I believe that humanity wants peace. I believe you are more than the monsters from the stories." Wei's expression softened. Something like hope appeared in her eyes. "And I will advocate for you," Al continued. "I will tell the Council what I have seen here. I will argue for giving humanity a chance. It will not be easy. There will be resistance, but I will try." "That is all I ask," Wei said, "the chance to try." They stood together at the window, the human and the, looking out at the stars. Behind them, the dog yawned and settled down for a nap. Somewhere in the distance, the debris of the fleet drifted silently through space. The galaxy was about to change. For the first time in 8,000 years, humanity was reaching out, not with weapons but with open hands, not with demands but with offers. Whether the galaxy would accept those offers remained to be seen. But Ambassador Al had hope. She had come expecting monsters. She had found something far more interesting. She had found humans. And humans, she was beginning to understand, were full of surprises. The Great Hall of Station Prime had never been so quiet. 847 species were represented in the chamber. Trillions of beings watched through screens and sensors across the galaxy. Every eye was focused on the small platform at the center of the room. Admiral Wei stood alone on that platform. She wore her formal uniform, decorated with medals and symbols of the Terran Navy. Her hands were empty. She carried no weapons. Around her, the representatives of the Concordat watched with fear, curiosity, hope, and suspicion in equal measure. Some sat in their seats. Others floated in anti-gravity fields. Some breathed through masks. Others communicated through light or vibration. They were all waiting for her to speak. Ambassador Al had worked for 3 months to arrange this moment. She had argued, pleaded, and persuaded the Council to grant humanity a hearing. It had not been easy. Many species wanted nothing to do with the monsters from the stories. They wanted to rebuild the censor blackout and pretend humanity did not exist. But Al had shown them the recordings from her meeting with Admiral Wei. She had shown them the art, the kindness, the dog sleeping peacefully at a human's feet. She had told them what she had learned. "We can fear them forever," she had said to the Council. "We can hide from them and hope they do not come for us, or we can give them a chance to be something other than the monsters in our nightmares. The choice is ours." The vote to grant a hearing had been close, very close, but it had passed. Now Admiral Wei stood before the galaxy, and everything depended on what she would say. "Thank you for allowing me to speak," she began. Her voice was calm and clear. The translation systems carried her words to every corner of the hall in hundreds of languages. "I know what you think of us. I know the stories you have heard. Humans are dangerous. Humans are violent. Humans come from a world so deadly that we should not exist at all. These things are true." Murmurs spread through the hall. This was not what they had expected. They had expected denials, excuses, attempts to minimize human nature. 8,000 years ago, your founders met my ancestors. That meeting ended in war. We were young then as a species. We were afraid. We were aggressive. We saw the galaxy as a threat and we responded with violence. Wei paused and looked around the hall. "We won that war, but winning brought us no joy. The founders sealed us away and we were left alone with what we had done. We had proven ourselves to be everything the galaxy feared. Monsters, killers, destroyers." She took a breath. "For many generations we struggled with this truth. We could not deny what we were, but we refused to accept that this was all we could be, so we made a choice. We decided that being dangerous was not enough. We would also be good." On a screen beside her, images began to appear. The same images Al had seen on the remembrance. Humans helping, humans creating, humans protecting. "This is what we have become. We have not lost our strength. We could not lose it even if we wanted to. But we have learned to use that strength for more than destruction. We protect the weak. We create beauty. We reach out to other species not to conquer them but to befriend them." The images showed humans working alongside aliens on human worlds, species that had been rescued from dying planets, refugees who had been given new homes, partners who had become friends. "These are the beings who share our space now. We did not conquer them. We invited them. They came to us because they were in need, and we helped them because helping is what we do." Wei stepped forward, closer to the watching representatives. "I will not pretend that we are safe. Humans will never be safe. We carry violence in our blood, in our history, in our very nature. If you threaten our people, we will respond with terrible force. This will never change." She let the words sink in. "But we are asking for a chance to show you what else we can be. Not your masters, not your conquerors, your partners, your friends, your protectors." She reached up and unclipped her ceremonial sidearm from her belt. Slowly, deliberately, she placed it on the podium before her. "I am a warrior," she said. "I have killed. I have led fleets into battle. I have ordered the deaths of thousands. This is my nature and I cannot change it. She stepped back from the weapon. But I am also more than that. I am a mother, a friend, a lover of music and poetry. I have held dying soldiers and wept for them. I have celebrated births and mourned deaths. I have laughed until my sides hurt and cried until my eyes were empty. Her voice grew stronger. This is what it means to be human. We are not one thing. We are many things, good and bad, light and dark, kind and cruel. We contain all of these and we choose which parts to show the world. She looked directly at Al, who sat in the front row. For 8,000 years, we have been choosing to be better. We are not asking you to trust us. Trust must be earned, and we know that. We are asking you to give us the chance to earn it. She spread her hands wide. Let us join your concordat, not as rulers, not as special members, as equals, subject to the same laws, the same responsibilities, the same expectations. Let us prove what we can be when we are not fighting alone. The hall was silent. Wei had finished speaking. Now the decision belonged to others. The debate lasted for 7 days. Representatives spoke for and against. Some pointed to the destruction of the fleet. Others pointed to the human art and kindness. Some demanded guarantees of safety. Others argued that no guarantees were possible from a species as unpredictable as humanity. High Commander was brought before the council in chains. He was asked to describe his experience with humanity. He told them about the battle, about the impossible skill of human pilots, about the terrible power of human weapons. But he also told them about his time as a prisoner. They treated us fairly, he admitted, the words seeming to hurt him. They gave us food and water, medical care for our wounded. They did not torture us. They did not abuse us. When I asked why, they said it was because such things were wrong. He shook his massive head. I do not understand them. They destroyed my fleet without mercy, then showed mercy to the survivors. They are warriors more terrible than any I have known, yet they speak of peace and friendship. I cannot explain what they are. I can only say that they are not simple creatures. They are complex in ways that my people are not. This testimony from an enemy carried weight. The vote came on the 7th day. Each species would have one vote. A simple majority would decide the question. Would humanity be allowed to join the Galactic Concordat? Al watched the votes come in. Her heart pounded in her chest. The numbers were close, too close. For every species that voted yes, another voted no. The decision could go either way. As the final votes were counted, the hall held its breath. 424 species voted no. 423 species voted yes. Humanity had lost by a single vote. The hall erupted in noise. Some species celebrated, others protested. Al felt her hopes crumble. All of her work, all of her arguments had not been enough. Then Admiral Wei raised her hand. The noise died down. Everyone turned to look at her. I accept your decision, she said simply. We asked for a chance and you have given your answer. We will return to our space. We will seal ourselves away again. We will not force ourselves upon those who do not want us. She picked up her weapon from the podium and clipped it back to her belt. But I want you to know something. Though we're not the only threat in the galaxy, there are others. Dangers you do not yet know about. If those dangers ever threaten you, if you ever need help that only we can provide, send word. We will come. She turned to leave. Wait. The voice came from the back of the hall, an ancient being moved forward. It was a primeval, one of the oldest species in the Concordat. They had been present when the founders created the Great Peace. Very few of them remained, and they rarely spoke in council. I am eldest, the primeval said. Its voice was like wind through old stones. I was young when your ancestors first came to our galaxy. I remember the war. I remember the fear. It moved slowly toward the platform. I voted against you, human. I feared what you might become. But now I see something I did not expect. It stopped before Admiral Wei. You accepted our rejection with grace. You did not threaten. You did not demand. You simply accepted and offered to help us even though we refused you. The ancient being seemed to study her. This is not what monsters do. It turned to face the council. I change my vote. I vote yes. The hall went completely silent. The question must be revoted, Al said quickly. If a member changes their position, the vote must be taken again. There was chaos as the council scrambled to verify the rules, but Al was right. The vote was taken again. This time, 10 more species changed their votes. 434 species voted yes. 413 species voted no. Humanity had been accepted into the Galactic Concordat. Wei stood very still on the platform. Her expression did not change, but Al could see her hands trembling slightly. "Thank you," the Admiral said quietly. "We will not make you regret this." The months that followed changed everything. Human ships began appearing throughout Concordat space. Not warships, but medical vessels, science ships, construction vessels. They brought technology freely, sharing advances that would have taken Concordat species centuries to develop. They built hospitals and schools. They repaired damaged stations. They helped species that had been struggling for generations. Human soldiers served alongside Concordat peacekeepers. They trained local forces and protected vulnerable populations. They asked for nothing in return except the chance to help. And when the war criminals were put on trial, it was a human judge who presided. The trials were fair. Evidence was presented. The accused were allowed to defend themselves. Those found guilty were punished. Those found innocent were released. High Commander was found guilty of crimes against sentient beings. He was sentenced to spend the rest of his life working to repair the damage he had caused. He accepted the sentence without protest. "I was wrong about them," he told Al after the trial. "I thought they were monsters. They are something more complicated, something that perhaps my people could learn from." The hegemony collapsed. Without their military, they had no way to hold their conquered territories. Species that had been enslaved for generations were freed. Some chose to join the Concordat. Others went their own way. The galaxy was changing. After 12,000 years of stagnation, things were moving again. New ideas spread. New alliances formed. New possibilities opened. And at the center of it all were the humans. They were not perfect. They made mistakes. They lost their tempers. They sometimes acted before thinking. But they kept trying. They kept working. They kept choosing to be better. Ambassador, Al wrote in her memoirs years later about this time. "We spent telling stories of human monsters," she wrote. "We taught our children to fear them. We sealed them away and hoped they would disappear. But they did not disappear. They grew. They changed. They became something the galaxy had never seen before." She paused in her writing and looked out at the stars. Human ships flew alongside vessels now. Human music played in Concordat halls. Human art hung in alien galleries. Human friends walked on alien worlds. "They were the monsters we warned our children about," Al continued. "They became the guardians we never knew we needed. They looked into the abyss of their own nature and chose the light anyway." She thought of Admiral Wei, now retired, living peacefully on a small world with her and her old dog. She thought of the young human soldiers who had died defending Concordat worlds, from threats the Concordat could not face alone. She thought of the human doctors who had worked themselves to exhaustion treating plagues that did not even affect their own species. She thought of a species that had every reason to hate the galaxy and chose, instead, to love it. "They showed us that what we are is not as important as what we choose to be," Al wrote, "and they chose to be our friends." She finished her memoirs with a simple observation. "The stories said humans were monsters. The stories were wrong. Humans are human. And that, I have learned, is the most wonderful and terrifying thing in the universe. Centuries passed, the galaxy continued to change. And whenever darkness threatened, whenever evil rose, whenever the peaceful species of the Concordat faced dangers they could not overcome, humanity was there. Not because they had to be, because they chose to be. And that made all the difference.